Good morning, everyone. Today, I will be talking about the environmental and social safeguard compliance challenges that are faced in institutions such as ADB when implementing the safeguard policy. And these are the practical aspects of complying with the ADB's policies and procedures. I will deal with one case study in Sri Lanka. But before we get into the case study, I will briefly touch upon the ADB's accountability mechanism policy. Now, ADB's accountability mechanism policy was established in 2003, but before that, there was this inspection function in 1995. And the precursor to that was that there was a project called Sardar Sarovar Dam in India, which was World Bank funded. And there were huge environmental and social issues related to the dam, and there were people protesting about it. And that was in 1993, and the World Bank at that time did not have any institutional setup on how to accept complaints and accept redress uh, and deal with the complaints. So they established an inspection function in 1993. Similarly, ADB had a project in Thailand, Samut Prakan, and there also people were protesting and they were complaining about the project. And ADB, following suit from the World Bank, established the inspection function in 1995. And it is also because ADB and the World Bank enjoys immunity for professional actions. So it's more like a self-governing and an internal system within the bank where people can, affected by the project, can complain and seek redress. People also do have a recourse of their own legal system within their countries to which they can go. So in 1995, this was established. And then this was enhanced into an accountability mechanism policy in 2003, learning lessons from few of the complaints. And the current policy is 2012, which will be updated in about 2 years' time, in my view. Now, this policy, like the previous one, responds to problems of the people affected by the ADB project, and it has to ensure compliance with ADB's policies and procedures. Now, what is meant is that if a project is not financed by ADB, obviously ADB cannot take those complaints, neither redress those. But ADB looks internally within itself, whether its own policies have been complied with and how the staff have done due diligence to ensure compliance with its policies. So it does not look at the government, it does not look at the private sector borrower or anyone else. So it's more like a self-correcting system within the ADB that ADB has established. Complaints related to procurement, staff misconduct, project audit are dealt separately, and there are different units within the ADB to deal with it. Accountability mechanism is the last resort mechanism. The first level for people to complain is the project level GRM. Every project nowadays has this GRM, and this is supposed to be well staffed. This is owned by the government. The government officers are in charge of that. Whenever a complaint is filed, they have to record all the complaints and how they have responded to the complaints within a particular time frame. And a project will have several GRMs at the lowest level of governance up to the central level. For example, if it is a road project spread over 400 kilometers, then obviously a person at the last stretch would not go up 400 kilometers to make a complaint. And therefore, it should be accessible to the people who are affected by the project so that they can easily make complaints, seek redress. Now, if they are not happy or satisfied with the project level GRM, they should go over to ADB's accountability mechanism, ADB's operations department or the resident mission. ADB's resident missions are part of the operations department. And even then, if they are not satisfied, then they can come over to ADB's accountability mechanism. But before they can approach ADB's accountability mechanism, it is mandatory that they should have approached ADB's operations department and have made good faith effort, that is called, with the operations department in trying to resolve the complaint. And if still not satisfied, then they can definitely come over to ADB's accountability mechanism. Now, ADB's accountability mechanism has two functions. One function is called the problem solving function, the other is a compliance review. Both these offices are headquartered here in ADB Manila. The problem solving and the compliance review, each office has very few staff. There are just two international staff and two national staff within each office. The problem solving special project facilitator reports to ADB's president. It is independent of the ADB management, but although the president is part of the ADB management, but still, it's independent of the other functionaries. The compliance review there's an office of compliance review with two international, two national staff, and then there is a compliance review panel. So the head of the office of the compliance review panel is also the chair of the compliance review panel. Besides that person, the CRP has two part-time members, and they are not based in ADB headquarters. They are based in their own home country, and they are used when there is a complaint and the complaint has to be addressed. This office reports directly to ADB board of directors, and therefore it's completely independent even of the ADB president. So these are two offices and completely independent of ADB management. They work independently. Now, issues that have been received by the accountability mechanism are those which which hurts the people directly. Most of these. So, for example, resettlement, compensation, inadequate compensation, issues related to land acquisition, uh, community and social issues are always there. Village infrastructure, where people have been relocated to other sites. People have lost their livelihood. So these are the complaints that they make. One of the common thread is about the information dissemination and consultation and participation, lack of consultation. People always complain that they have not been informed about the project, they have not been consulted properly, and they have not been participating in the projects, or they have not been allowed to participate in the project. And consultation should always be meaningful. So there was a complaint from a project in Indonesia, a road project, where indigenous people complain that they do not know much about project, they have not participated. Now, ADB and the project authorities there said that everything is on the web. It's also in English, it's also in Bhasa. And these people then, they were saying, well, we don't even understand Bhasa very properly. We are indigenous, we speak our own dialect. So these are the practical issues. So people have to be informed, and many of these people are illiterate. They cannot read, write. So they have to be informed verbally, and people have to consult them. So these are the practical issues that are faced. For example, this particular project was going over to the board on Monday, and on Friday, ADB received by email through the NGOs a complaint about the project. And this email was to ADB president, to the entire board of directors, and to us people in the transport division. So it's so easy to make complaints. And then we had to sit down Saturday, Sunday responding to that, because surely the board would ask questions about the complaint. So again, practical issues that you need to be prepared. Number of complaints in recent years have definitely risen. And there are a number of reasons for that. One is, of course, that ADB's commitment is increasing. ADB is also processing much more complex projects. Earlier, for example, if it is a road project, it could be rural road project, or it could be a state highway, and may have upgrading and not much of widening, so less of land acquisition requirement. But now projects, for example, metro projects in cities. For example, in Vietnam, ADB was financing Hanoi Metro, Ho Chi Minh Metro projects, and these are the first time that the country is having a metro system in dense populated areas. So many people are affected. The land has to be acquired. Plus, there are issues related to construction during the construction itself, which people face. Plus, the GRM, which is now every project must have, may not be functioning properly, and sometimes the attitude of people who are manning these GRM is not very good towards very poor people as well. So that does happen. Access to information and technology has increased a lot. So it's very easy for people to make complaint. They can do it on social media as well. And when ADB is processing projects, then about the accountability mechanism, about where people can go if they have issues related to the project, all these are informed to the people. So they are aware of the project, and they also are aware of where to complain. Plus the NGO CSOs, one is number of NGOs CSOs have increased, and they are more active in ensuring that people, if there are complaints, the NGOs also help them in that. So with active dissemination of accountability mechanism policy also within the project, people are aware and they can make complaints. Now we get into the case study of Sri Lanka Transport Development Project. This was the first ever controlled two-lane highway from Colombo to Galle. Now, this is the map of Sri Lanka, and Colombo is here, the capital of Sri Lanka in the south, and this is Galle. So this was the road which was to be constructed, and this was a greenfield project, which means there was nothing out there, no road, no dirt path as well. And this was in forest areas and mountains and plains and rivers. So completely new, and people had been living there for a number of years, and this was their ancestral land. So they were also not very happy when the project was being prepared and implemented. When the project was being processed, many of these sites, because it was completely greenfield, were inaccessible to the consultants. So sufficient site investigation had not taken place. For example, even when the project started, the real geological conditions, soil type, rock type, whether it was hard or soft and things like that, had not been done. In many areas, hydrological studies had not been done properly. And all that led to a lot of delays of the project, and plus the cost overrun. The cost was so high that uh, earlier the ADB had provided the original project with 90 million US dollars, and plus of course the JPEG funding was there, and supplementary loan had to be processed of the same amount, because at that time there was a cap on the value of supplementary loan that could be provided. So it could not be more than the original loan. Plus, because of all these unknowns at the time, when the contractor was on the site, it was a design build contract, which means the contractor had to do the entire survey, the detailed design of the pavement, of all the structures required, and those had to be approved by the design supervision consultants. And that also took time, and huge delays on the project also because of the public protest. People were protesting of inadequate compensation, gender analysis not having been done properly. Then there was a change in alignment as well. So almost about 28 kilometers of this road had to be realigned. And realignment means that the environmental impact assessment had to be redone, and new sets of people got affected by the project because of this. So a major change in scope for the project had to be done. So things like this, and people wanted that consultation should be done again once all the studies, the due diligence is available. And there were many NGOs and locals who wanted suspension of the project and suspension of disbursements. Now, on a project like this, when the contractor is on site, it's virtually impossible to suspend a project or tell the contractor to stop working, because he will start complaining and make claims related to idle charges of equipment, of machinery, of their staff. And plus there was this whole team of design supervision consultants, and they will also claim for idle charges. So there were huge issues as well when the contractor was working, and in this kilometer of road, uh, the contractor prepares a work program, and he should work according to the work program. That's how he puts in his resources of men and machinery. But because there were many sites where people started protesting, they were not allowing the contractors to go. In that site, he had to he opened fronts on the 15 locations, and which means that his machinery and men were spread thinly all over. So that was not the most optimal way of working. So these were also claims of the contractor of not being allowed to work because the government has to provide unencumbered land to the contractor, and all the land should be provided ideally at the beginning, but then they can stagger where the contractor has to work, and according to the work program which was approved. So these were the issues, and at many sites there were violence also, and the protesters did not allow people affected by the project were not allowing even ADB missions to go to the sites or even to talk to them, because they just said that they have not been their complaints have not been addressed properly. So they were talking about the inventory of losses has not been done. For example, if a person had 15 banana trees in their house, he said only five have been counted. If he had a house of concrete roof, he said, well, the concrete instead of concrete, only the tin shed has been accounted for. Things like that. Plus, the neighbors came complaining, saying that, well, that person's banana tree has been valued X rupees, whereas my banana tree has been valued much less, and I'm just a neighbor, so why this less? Things like that. So, even those kind of things, and number of people involved or affected by this was 6,000 families, and average family is 5 persons. So 30,000 people were impacted by this. Almost 1,300 families had to be relocated. So you can imagine the amount of relocation and work that had to be done. Then, because of the change in alignment, new sets of people, so the entire inventory of losses, the detailed measurement survey, the evaluation of their property losses, livelihood losses had to be redone, and things like that. Many of these people, the ADB policy requires that people should be real or their resettlement sites are relocated to as near to the original site as possible. One is, of course, the minimize the relocation resettlement. The other is, have as close to their original sites. And because these were ancestral sites, people were really emotionally attached to that. And some of these relocation sites were 15 kilometers away. And so people had part of the land in the original site, and then they had to go and live somewhere else. And even to till the land, they had to come back to the original site. So that they were really facing huge issues. At the resettlement sites, all they were given land to build the houses, and they were complaining that the amount of money that they have got, they cannot rebuild the similar kind of house. ADB policy is that it should the compensation should be at replacement value or market value, so that if their structure is lost, they should be able to replace their structure and have that structure at any other location, similar structure if not better. So they were complaining about that. Plus, the roads and the water and the electricity provided in new sites were inadequate. They were unhappy about that. Plus, a lot of people, who received the compensation were building better houses. So, with whatever compensation that they got, they finished that, and they had no money, for example, for their kids if they had fallen sick, or for them to send to schools, or even to buy the daily stuff they needed to eat, etc. The income restoration program was delayed by 5 years, which should start even before people are relocated. So there were huge issues, and there were many houses which were women-headed and vulnerable houses. So they had not been conduct their livelihood, and they have not been assessed properly. Their losses had not been considered properly. Uh, the implementing agency in this project was RDA, Road Development Authority of Sri Lanka. And they were also complaining. They were saying, well, we are a technical unit, and this project doesn't look like that it's about road building anymore, but it looks like more of a social project. And there were a lot of complaints. But then they had to hire almost about 30 staff in their office for land acquisition, resettlement, compensation payment, etc. This particular project, because of the complaints and because of the compliance review panel that they recommended to establish GRM, because there were so many people impacted and had to be addressed to. So the GRM was established first time in the project, and all future projects do have to have the GRM. That became evident in the Safeguard Policy 2009. Uh, in Sri Lanka, this computerized monitoring of inventory of losses and payment and the status, etc., was being done for this particular project. Uh, and plus, their secretary was again talking about that for almost 2 years. He had to spend Saturdays and Sundays with the Land Acquisition Resettlement Committee, ensuring that all these inventory of losses are done properly, the valuation is done properly, that the people are compensated properly. And at one time, when the CRP mission was to come for its annual monitoring, and if I remember, it was second annual monitoring. The secretary said that they will not be allowed to come. They can come only over my dead body. So that was the relationship that had happened because of the CRP as well. Because the secretary and the RDA and the government was saying that when the CRP comes here, they listen more to the people. They are look like they are more pro NGOs, and whatever the government commented on the CRP report, that was not considered by the CRP. And the government said even if they do not consider those, and CRP is independent, so they have their own. They may consider or they may not consider, but the government said at least their comments should form part of the CRP report, even as an appendix, so that people, because these reports are uploaded, so people should know what CRP has written, which they know, but what the government has commented on the CRP's report, they should also know. So these were the issues, and for the government, the CRP, although CRP within ADB is independent, but for the government, it's one ADB. So we who were in the front line always had to manage this relationship. There used to be monthly monitoring meetings chaired by the secretary himself on the project, and in those monthly meetings there would be 50, 60 people. The RDA staff who are involved with the project would be there, and plus ADB, the JBIC, Japan Bank, the contractors, the consultants would also be there. And many times these meetings would be very fiery because even the government staff, some of them would say, well, this is a public project and government should be able to acquire land free of cost. And it's only because of the ADB policy that we have to pay them very high compensation and all that. And we had to counter that saying, well, ADB belongs to the government. These policies are endorsed by the government. So it's basically government has endorsed everything and we are only implementing these policies. So even those kind of things would be there. And all relationship had to be maintained. Interactions with NGOs would at many times be very volatile, vociferous. And one of these Japanese NGOs would say that this is taxpayers' money and this is not a free money, and this is what should be done on a project and all that. But the thing was that in my interaction with at least one NGO, we sat down almost for about 2.5 hours, and we explained about what's happening, and we also listened to them very carefully on what's happening. We said, look here, you have your grievances, but can you not write your grievances, and what is the practical solution that you see on a project like this? And if you give it to us, I'm sure we will have a meeting along with the government, and we will ensure that all the practical solutions that you provide are implemented to the extent possible. After that, they never came back. So anyway, but our NGO interaction has in many projects been extremely good, and we have used them also for benefit of the people, like in Cambodia Railway, a similar project where we used an NGO to reach out to the affected community because they rely more on the NGOs who are at the grassroots level. One very unfortunate incident happened was a killing of a lady because the contractor had to blast these huge mountains that were there. And he had taken all safety precautions, and it was that even a week before, he would distribute leaflets, information. Everyone living around the contractor staff would go inform them that this is the time wherein the rock blasting will take place. So you cannot be within the radius of 100 meters where the rock blasting is taking place. When it took place, they even would have siren and whistles, etc., so that people are alarmed that look here now, the blasting will take place. And one of the blast rock, one of the small pebbles which flew and killed a lady sitting almost about 125, 130 kilometers away. And this was a young lady, 30 years old, and she had just given birth to about 3 or 4 month old child. So, it was very sad that this incident happened. But next day on the TV, there was a blast about ADB the killer. So ADB is always there in the front page, and they know, all these journalists also, they know that ADB is risk averse, of this reputational risk is always very high on the agenda. So quite a lot of people in the headquarters and even the country director and all jumped around. Look here, we have to manage all that, and we said that look here, definitely we are managing it, but at this moment, if we just send a rebuttal to the newspaper, it's like adding fuel to the fire. So you got to be very careful about that. Then we sat with the RDA, and the minister had his own media office. We use the media office. So every day, almost initially, there would be snippets on the TV about the project, about the impacts of the project during construction, about the benefits of the project once completed, about what the government is doing to compensate, these kind of things, so that people are also informed, the journalists are also, the media is also informed about what actually is being done. Then we took busload of journalists onto the site, the entire stretch, and we made them also talk to the people who were affected by the project. Some were very happy, some were not. But the journalists got their own, free hand at talking to the people and understanding what their grievances are. Plus, we explained them about the project and the benefits it will bring to the region. So when we all came back, for next week or two, there were real good newspaper reporting, and everybody was very happy that finally the project is getting good media attention and positive media attention. But there was a lull of about a month, and then there was all again, bad press for the project, because there were other couple of journalists who had not gone on this particular busload of journalists that we took to the site. They were unhappy, and they started taking, not very good things about the project. But then, whenever the senior staff also of the ADB would come, we would make sure that they visit the site, and they also meet with affected people, and they were free to meet anyone that they want, so that they get their own views about what's happening and how we need to handle this. There would be quarterly reports that we had to submit to the compliance review panel, and we ensured that they would get all documents possible. And every week we were sending almost about 3 feet high, document. Those were the number of documents that we would send to the CRP, and we always would think among ourselves that let's drown the CRP with information. Uh, on the project, in one end, southern end of the project, there was a floodplain area, and during the monsoon the area would get flooded, and when the highway was constructed at that point, the embankment itself was 24 meters high from the ground level. And initially there was no proper study that had been done, the drainage study, and therefore there was no uh, way or no structure provided by which these water from the floodplain area would go over to some other sites, to follow the natural stream and path and all that. So that study had to be redone, and structures had to be provided in the highway for that. Some of the houses nearby, people would complain that they are getting damaged. So we would later on, the contractor would say, well, we don't know, because some of these houses are so old that they already may have had cracks. So later on, learning, we would ask the contractor to start filming the houses before they start any activity, and so that they can tell the people if it was really damaged because of the project or it was damaged earlier. People had complained about noises issues also because of the progress and the slow progress. We allowed that the contractor should work overtime and even in the night, but in the night, because of the heavy machinery and all that, people were complaining they cannot sleep. So we had to cut down on the time. And then where embankment was so high, and plus it was an access controlled highway, nobody had thought of giving underpasses so that the animals can cross from one side of the highway to the other. And some of the people who were impacted by the project had land on both the sides. So obviously, crossing for animals had to be provided. When the contractor was working in many of these areas, and there would be soils, spoils which come out. So they were throwing the spoils on the sides, and it would spill onto the agriculture land of the people, and people would complain. Obviously, they were either losing the crop, or they cannot farm the land because of the soils and all which had been spread over the land. So had to make sure that this is not done, and they are compensated adequately for the loss. Rock blasting techniques had to be looked at properly so that incidents do not happen. And plus the batching plant where concrete mixing is taking place, ensure that the environmental and social impacts are reduced and mitigated, and that there are noise barriers all across so that people living nearby are not impacted. And plus the quarry where these huge rocks are broken into smaller rocks for use on the pavement. There's a lot of air pollution at these sites, and therefore it's also water sprinkled on the long conveyors carrying these rocks, so that people are not impacted in the nearby area. So these were all issues that, what I've told you are some of the issues that had to be addressed at the site. But eventually, when the project was completed, and we would always find people from nearby area also, if ADB mission is in the nearby, they would say, well, when are you laying the road on this side or doing a project on this side? Because they were quite satisfied with the amount of compensation that they had received. But then while you are implementing the project, there are a lot of issues that you need to manage. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. And I would like to give credit to ADB reports presentations that I have referred to in here. Thank you very much.